Judy East. I'm the Director for Resource Information and Land Use Planning at the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to join us today to listen to the results of the Growth Management Program survey, as well as to help us identify some priorities moving forward based on these results. The folks online are joining a group of roughly 20 people who are assembled in the Hancock County Planning Commission offices in Ellsworth. This is a regular biannual meeting of the regional councils. Okay. Audio on out.
Yeah, I've never had
Shall I turn mine on? Because I'm muting myself.
no, because it's going to happen. Look, unmute yourself on the piano.
Okay, I am now unmuted. The owl is muted. Okay, starting over again. Can you hear me?
That's better.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start this over again. Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Judy East. I'm the Bureau Director for Resource Information and Land Use Planning at the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. You online, about 21 participants last count, are joining roughly the same number of people at the Hancock County Planning Commission offices in Ellsworth. This is a regular biannual meeting of the regional councils. So we're going to go over today the Growth Management Program survey results, as well as solicit your input on setting some direction for the department and for priorities. There's things going on in the chat. How's the audio? We're okay?
It's good.
All right, fine. So the Growth Management Program survey was, you're advancing? Okay.
I'm advancing on for your notes.
Oh, okay. Very good. That second slide, yes. Okay. The Growth Management Program survey was out and available for responses for all of August. We extended it to the end of September. The 3 meetings, of which this is the first, the purposes are to provide an overview of the results that we received, as well as to facilitate a conversation to hear what your responses are or reactions are to the conclusions we've made, and to set some priorities for how the program will take in this input. The first meeting today is on improving the preparation of comprehensive plans, as well as the state review process. We have we will be recording each of these meetings. The next 2 are next week. First, to answer the question of how can we support implementation of comprehensive plans. The third, with a strong focus on technical assistance resources. And like I said, all the meetings will be recorded. So getting into the survey itself, as many of you online and in this room know, growth management itself is complex, and so was this survey. We asked 31 questions, and embedded within the first 13 were actually 5 or 6 other questions. So there were lots of, it was a big demand on people, and they responded very nicely. We had 74 responses. We asked for input on actions and barriers to encourage growth and achieve that in growth areas, strategies to implement the goal of directing that growth, how to improve and streamline preparation of plans, support that you need to do so. Revising the statute was also, there were a few questions on that, especially concerning supporting housing development. And then several questions about the utility of the review process, and then some demographic questions. We had many thoughtful written comments. I'm going to provide some summaries for you. They're all available in the story map, which Joan has put a link to in the chat. Thank you, Joan. Ashley Gamache created the story map. She did a very good job summarizing the comments. If you want to see them verbatim, they're available on a linked page. So today, we're not going to go through all of the questions because there were a lot of them. We're going to roughly break the 3 meetings out according to the list. I don't need to read those numbers in order to answer these overarching questions of how do we make this better, both to prepare and review comp plans. And then next week, it's supporting implementation and prioritizing technical assistance. To be fair, a lot of the questions touch on all of these issues, but we just wanted to put this into bite-sized pieces. So a quick note about navigation. The story map is linked on this page. It was linked in the chat. Comments are summarized first at the right in the story map. And a couple of notes about the symbols. At the bottom of the comments summary, you'll see C with a plus sign, all individual comments, and it'll pop open a window to the left. And then you can, if you don't want to see that window, you just hit the X and that window goes away. But you'll also notice when you pop open the individual comments that you can't see them all. So that little symbol of in the upper right corner opens a new page, and then you can see all of the comments. Scrolling down below the comments, you'll see the question pop up. And what we've provided to everybody are the actual responses. So the absolute numbers are in bar charts. And then we thought it would be helpful to summarize in percentages in pie charts. I'm going to be using the pie charts in this presentation to give you the percentages essentially in favor or not in favor, and so on. I was going to open up that web page, but I think I'm going to save time and not do that. It's available to all of you to pop open that web page. If you're online, you can reach it. So the flow of this meeting today, we've got 2 hours. I'm going to try and get through the presentation in a half an hour. We'll have an hour-long discussion, at least, about what did we miss, both in the survey or in our conclusions, and we'll be providing those conclusions today. And then we'll leave, if it's not a half hour, maybe it's a little less time, but we're going to try and see if you can give us some priorities to achieve the goals here of improving the preparation of comp plans and the state review process. Joan is going to be taking notes of what those high-level conclusions are, so that we'll put that slide in front of you later on to see if we can set some priorities. Not sure if that's going to work because there's an awful lot here, but we're going to give it a shot. Okay, let's start first with this is just a quick run through of the demographics. Sorry for the size of the font here, the translation from the ArcGIS. Sometimes you just can't play with the size of the font there. The most responses, 14 is the top bar, came from people who associate with multiple regions or statewide. And then the next several bars are predominantly Southern and Mid-Coast Maine. The exception is the third bar, which is Eastern Maine Development Corps, which kind of represents the Bangor area, I would think, with the number of responses. And then all the way down to the bottom, you've got lesser responses in Lincoln County, Northern Maine, and Sunrise County or Washington County. Though I will say that Lincoln County has been active in our meeting today. They're represented. Let's say that. We don't want to leave you out. We also have a list here. We asked which city or town do you associate with? And so the list of each of the towns is there. I hope online you can see that better than we can in this room, because I can see it on my screen. But the really large bar over on the left is 34 respondents, little under half, associate with multiple communities. We also asked, have you ever participated in reviewing or drafting one of these things? 63 people said yes. The significance of the date, 2012, is that's the last time the comprehensive plan review criteria rule changed. And then the others are no, wasn't involved or did not respond. We then asked, okay, so what was your role? The top 2 are municipal or regional planning staff, then comprehensive plan committee members, not surprisingly. The no response bar, the purple one, is 11. That corresponds exactly with the people who said, I wasn't involved or I didn't respond. Then we have consultants, the next order of who responded: consultants, interested citizens, state agencies, 5 of them, planning board members, and then one person who said other. Sorry, I don't remember what other meant in that case. Planning director?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, let's get into the survey results. Remember, now we're doing question 1, 7, 8, and 9, and then 21 to 23. So first question, you'll all be glad to know that I'm not going to give you a pie chart for every single one of these items, because I can give you some high points and then discuss what some of the other bulleted action items on that list said. So we were asking, what are the effectiveness of a variety of actions to encourage growth and development in locally designated growth areas? People, for the most part, said it's effective, over 50%, that the state consistency review of comp plans is effective to direct growth into locally designated growth areas. Secondarily, it is effective that if we provided guidance for defining growth in rural areas in order to ensure that growth is directed there. Not surprisingly, the last 3 bullets there, I'll go through quickly. Financial incentives to support development, off the charts high. Everyone thinks that money is going to solve the issue, and it usually does. Land conservation as well was seen as very effective action to encourage growth in the right places. Current use taxation there was some less enthusiasm there for its effectiveness. Quite a few people basically said, really don't know, not unsure. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier that was really helpful and will continue to be is we had an enormous amount of input in written comments, especially in the first couple of questions. So in terms of sort of related input from those comments, to give us direction on the effectiveness of how we can encourage growth and development in growth areas. I don't know that reducing the inventory burden or increasing flexibilities for small communities really helps direct growth, but it came up so many times, I put it there first. I will stress, though, that people said, give us flexibility, but retain data-informed decision-making. People said, we need tools to improve efficiency, that many issues are best addressed at the regional level, to provide support for implementation measures, both in terms of money and technical assistance. And many stressed that the integration of goals to integrate climate and hazard mitigation with land use planning was really, really important. And that as things are adjusted going forward, that's something to include. People observed the essential public engagement needs of communities, but that they can also be challenging, and are specifically asking for state guidance on how to do the engagement and how to do the overall planning process in general. You won't be surprised that political disagreement can often make things much more complicated. So in terms of the flow of this presentation, for each of these areas, we're going to give you a summary of, in this case, there were other comments, but also what our conclusions are. And this is where we're going to focus at the end of the meeting is, what have we missed in this? So the other comments on this overall question about actions to encourage growth stressed flexibility and local definitions. People said communities should have the freedom to define growth on their own terms. This new concept of place types is useful, but local definitions should be allowed, especially to suit rural communities. Incentives to promote growth near services were mentioned quite a few times, both financial and policy incentives in order to encourage growth in the right places. People want clear guidance on the benefits of planning. Why do comprehensive planning. Help us explain the benefits to our local communities and local planning committees. And that will require, you know, engagement and some education. There were other comments too about the fact that comp plans are one thing, and while zoning ordinances should be consistent with the future land use map, they often are not. One person suggested the state should review zoning ordinances to ensure that they're consistent with the future land use map in comp plans, or that incentives be provided to ensure that consistency. Infrastructure money directed to growth areas is a pretty obvious one. And removing barriers to growth had a lot more to do with implementation and measures that can be put into zoning ordinances. So you can see what our conclusions are. Flexibility all around, especially for the unique needs of small communities. Lots of clearer guidance is needed. Defining rural and growth areas, how to integrate hazard mitigation and comp planning, and there's another question on that later. Guidance on public engagement, and so on. So these are our conclusions. We're going to be coming back to these. So let's take a look at jumping to number 7. We were asking people about the effectiveness of reducing comp plan inventory requirements. This is to address the commonly leveled criticism of the growth management law is a one-size-fits-all statute. It needs to have more flexibility. So we asked, what do you think about requiring comp plans to analyze data, but not reproduce what is available online? Relatively strong support there, over 50%. Also, the idea was, what if you prioritize and reduce data requirements for all comprehensive plans? Very strong, 59%. Yep. And we've heard that. We've thought it ourselves within the program. We've heard that loud and clear. And it'll come out many more times. There were similar results in response to the next 2 bullets. That is, for communities below a certain population size, we could consolidate most inventory into a regional context chapter. That was pretty strongly supported. Also supported, but not as strong, was to reference regional plans to substitute for comp plan elements, except land use, because that's still very much a local issue. So going to the comments again and our conclusions. There were some very helpful threshold ideas in this notion of tailoring comp plan requirements based on, and here are the suggestions: population, municipal valuation, capacity, both in terms of staff and budget, and whether or not a town is near a major service center or has essential services. These are really helpful threshold ideas. How we operationalize them is going to be another nut to crack, but some super good ideas in the comments. Related, again, as we said, regional collaboration, regional plans. Some noted that, okay, they're small towns, but still they can quadruple, quintuple, even more seasonally. And so that is an issue. They're not just small towns all the time. And there was a call for standardization of state data that's provided to towns. So I don't think I need to read those conclusions. Again, I think it's been stated already in the way that the input was provided in the comments. Jumping now to the issue of integrating natural hazard mitigation and community resilience with growth management. There were 2 things that I'll highlight here. The first one being, what do you think of the effectiveness of incorporating existing climate vulnerability assessments, they could be local, regional, or statewide, into the designation of growth areas? Very strong support. 66% see it as effective or highly effective. Likewise, and even more so, jumping down to the 4th bullet, mapping and visualization tools of natural hazard risks when developing future land use maps. 83% said that would be highly effective or effective. Joan has put a new mapping tool into the chat. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go to click to it, but if you click that map or that story map and use I believe it's the Climate Risks in Maine tab, this is another story map that Ashley Gamache at the Municipal Planning Program has created. and it provides really good statewide, and then you can drill into your own town's vulnerabilities around drought, fire, floods, and so on. It's not new information. It's just a very nicely organized tool for municipalities to get this information for their own purposes. The other three items here, there was agreement with, if you're not enrolled in the Community Resilience Partnership, that's the CRP acronym, you can use their self-assessment tool to set climate action goals. Stronger support, though, was for incorporating county and local emergency management plans in comp plan strategies, and then joint community engagement that is required in both processes, the Community Resilience Partnership and growth management. But I want to jump to the comments on that because I think there's some significant qualifications to that notion of let's do this together. And that is, great idea. Resilience should be a core element in comp plans. We should include risk analyses, but coordination should also recognize that we need to have some kind of simplification of that integration. State and regional support is important there. We don't want to overwhelm people with yet another thing to deal with. Jumping back up to this inclusion of risk analysis, several comments from towns also said, okay, but let us determine our own risk tolerance. That is, are we going to build a wall or not? Are we going to move or not? That is a local decision and one that has its own financial repercussions. Clearly, there's a need for financial and technical support in this integration question. The Community Resilience Partnership has just been recapitalized at $8 million, and it's an open competition right now for community or climate action plans. So there is support for that. And there are towns, several that we just heard this morning in Washington County, who are using that funding to both update their risk analysis and their comprehensive plans simultaneously. So conclusions here are to balance the state provided data with local flexibility, that the regional support that is provided by mostly regional planning organizations, but there are other actors in this sphere. Island Institute, GMRI, which stands for Gulf of Maine Research Institute. There's lots of players here, and they're super important in providing data and analysis to municipalities. And that there's a need for engagement and training, and as always, collaboration, but the collaboration is a way that you're going to save money. Okay, next we're going to move to, okay, hang on, let's click the right place. The usefulness of sources of information to prepare comprehensive plans. There were 3 questions embedded here. I'm only going to provide you a chart of the middle one, and that is we were asking people what they thought about the utility of the new comp plan data portal. Again, Joan has put a link to that comp plan data portal and mapping services page in the chat for you to take a look at. And people in this pie chart, it was a very strong endorsement for its utility, 60% of people, of respondents. There was less enthusiasm with the data packages delivered before this data portal was prepared, but people still found it useful. And then there's also a municipal, regional, and statewide plans portal. Again, Joan is going to put that in the chat, and it was seen as useful, but it was really this comp plan data portal that has been of especially significant utility to municipalities. However, as the comments often provide, there's a richness of detail here that we really appreciate hearing from, and so while the data portal is seen as useful and appreciated, there's definitely still issues. There's data quality and then access to data issues. people said, we need more support in using this, especially small communities. There's an overwhelming factor to it, and I agree with that. It does a lot of things, and people need help to know, well, okay, but let me focus on just the things that are important to me, to my town, to my issues. There's older data format issues. That's kind of a problem that's never going to go away. Training and support is needed. I've already kind of mentioned that. And then I could not agree more that statewide digital parcel and zoning maps are essential for us to move the dial on this. So our conclusions in terms of information sources, kind of in addition to the issues that are mentioned with the data portal, is that there are continuing cumbersome zip file data delivery issues from some departments. We're working on that, but it's still an issue. There is need for more proactive guidance and training with these new tools, and that really helps with this notion of directing people to the data that's of most significance and utility to their needs. All right, I'm going to jump now to the last 4 questions. And this question, they're all related to the state review process. So first of all, the question was, did the state review identify important information, recommendations, or strategies that we didn't think about or that we're missing? 31%, yeah, I agree. Most people said, I don't know. 50% said, I can't comment. And it's probably because they weren't in the review process. The next question was, hang on, I'm not getting it to move. Right. Did state comments improve the plan? So did you incorporate these comments and improve the overall quality and relevance of the plan? Much stronger response here. 41% said, yeah. So less, again, with the neither agree nor disagree, but still, it's stronger that, yep, we incorporated it and the plan was better because of it. Then the second to last question, having the plan deemed consistent made it easier to get it adopted. Even stronger response, yes. This answer, the last question, is concerning to me because we asked, did getting your plan deemed consistent help you qualify for state funding? 39% said strongly agree or agree. It's in the statute that you should qualify for state funding or at least get bonus points if your plan is consistent with the growth management law. The fact that only 39% feel that it makes a difference is something that I think provides important information for the state to consider. Okay, now final slide on what we heard from comments. Again, with respect to the consistency with state law, the current requirements for achieving consistency are overly burdensome. We heard that with the data requirements, and it's coming out here as well. There is general support for the state review process, but the reducing data requirements and streamlining for smaller towns was stated many times, and then needing clearer, actionable feedback in the review process. I think this is an important message for the program to listen to. Rather than a focus, the people said there is a disproportionate focus on technical compliance rather than on actionable planning guidance. And that goes to in the review and also getting guidance or expectations at the outset of the planning process. Super important comment, and there's detail in the comments about that. The last point, I don't know what was behind this, and maybe people will say so in our meetings, but there was a comment that plans have been approved by the state despite containing false data. I find that worrying, and I don't know what that is referring to, and I'm going to be looking into that further. Also, so final conclusions, I don't need to read these to you. I think we've said it, and I think we can move. We'll be seeing these conclusions again. Let's move from this part of the presentation into our conversation around, sorry, I keep clicking this to the wrong place and then I can't advance. There we go. to our discussion, which will be facilitated. I can't remember if I introduced you, Jody. It's Jody Sapphire, who's a special assistant to the commissioner in the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. So in this overall question of how to improve the preparation of comprehensive plans, I will get this out of, is this in the way of the owl? No.
No, Max is just getting it set up right.
Oh, okay. If we want to improve both the preparation of comprehensive plans and the state review process, has the survey or our conclusions, have we missed anything? And what I've got for the next 5 slides are these, I'll just scroll quickly. 1, 7, 8, 9, these are the comments, right? And then just to give you a preview, Joan is going to be keeping track of the conversation over the next hour. We'll pop this up so that virtual participants can give us some priorities, and in-person participants in this room can do it on paper. So I'm going to go back to those conclusions. The question has been put in the chat. Is that correct, Joan? Yep. That will guide this conversation. So over to you, Jody.
Great. Hi, everyone online. Jody Sapphire. Nice to see you. I'm seeing everybody mostly as a 2-letter acronym for your names, and the actual names that you have are not really legible. So I'm relying on my phone to identify who would like to provide comment. And the phone app for Teams is somewhat limited. So unlike what you would normally do online of raising your hand to make a comment, I'm going to ask if you can rely exclusively on the chat and simply put the letter C in there if you want to make a comment, and then I'll be able to see more of your name and I can call on you. So let's see if that works. If not, we'll pivot and we'll do something else. But I do wonder, Joan, if it might make sense to list both questions at once, because I think it's going to make for a richer conversation. So just as a reminder, what we're looking for feedback is, did the survey or the conclusions miss something? But then also, what do you draw as the priority? So we're going to bounce first to question 1. And if we can pull that up, and you'll see essentially the range of comments on that question, and then the conclusions that we drew, which may not be the same as your own. So just open it up for general comments. And just put a C in, and then I'll see who you are in the chat. And if we need to bounce back to the more detailed slide on that question so that you can see the responses, we can do that. The breakdown of people who agree or disagree, we can do that. But again, the question is, how effective are various actions to encouraging growth and development in locally designated growth areas? Comments?
I can start the conversation.
Please do it.
I certainly think it helps with giving a nice indication to the potential developers who come to the area. Yeah, I know. I'm just giving my 2 cents, and might spark some interest throughout there.
Can they hear you?
They can.
Okay, perfect.
Hopefully they can hear me.
Okay.
I don't know.
Great.
I think the effectiveness is more just data driven. I get a lot of people who just say, I'm Max Johnstone with the Midcoast Council of Governments, and person who, even though does Zoom meetings, keeps forgetting to introduce himself when the camera's not on himself. I think data is a very important thing. A lot of people take for granted. Even people who live in towns forever and say we don't need a comp plan, sometimes by the end they say how very important and very educational the process is, just to find out things that they may not have even realized in the town, like how many building permits happen, what the role is of a few people or different committees. So that's my thoughts on just how important the data is. And that's, I think, why you see a lot of people saying how important the state support and data is.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Did we miss something here? Did anything feel missing to you? Okay. So we're looking for some
This one.
feedback.
We gotta
from
see.
Gotta see.
Michael M. Go right ahead, and if you could
Hi,
introduce yourself.
Michael Martone. I'm the town planner in
Take yourself off
Damerscott
mute.
and Newcastle. Am I on mute still? Can you
And
hear
we're
me?
not yet hearing. Hold on. Hold on.
We have the speaker turned to the owl.
It is.
Anything? Oh, they can hear me online. Can you hear me in person? The people in person? Now I can't hear anything.
I can hear you online.
You can hear me online.
Yeah, it sounds like they can't hear you in the room.
We can hear you.
We now can.
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
us?
I can hear somebody talking.
Perfect.
Good enough. Good
Go
enough.
for it. All right, tell us who
Um,
you are.
So I'm Michael Martone. I'm the town planner for Damerscott and Newcastle. And I don't want to take the conversation off in a kind of unnecessary direction. But one of the things that I'm finding is, and I think I generally agree with a lot of what's been discussed, but kind of getting it to hit the ground. I've got a lot of people in both of the towns that have some really good ideas and really want to implement them. Obviously, there's issues around getting consensus, and some people want, some people don't want. But something that I feel like is missing is the code enforcement side of things and the actual implementation. I don't think that either town that I work in is an anomaly. That code enforcement seems to be fairly detached from the planning board and from like the planning and the review in general. And I'm struggling, and I don't know if this is different in getting it's one thing to get the comprehensive plan down into the zoning and have the zoning ordinance, be consistent with the comprehensive plan, but then actually implementing that and knowing whether or not our policies and our ordinances are being administered properly is a whole. It seems like there's a point at which it turns into the Wild West. And the review and whether it's consistent with our ordinance, and not for lack of effort necessarily on code enforcement, but I just am I feel like there should be, I wish there were more code enforcement officers in the room, in this room, because it seems like a lot of what I always assumed fell to planners is falling to code enforcement, and they have a very different perspective on all of this. So
Sure.
the best laid
Well-
plans aren't making it to actual implementation.
Sure. Matthew, thank you. And also, I think it's a really good promotional for next week's session,
Yes.
which is on the 13th. We'll talk about that at the end of the meeting, but it's a good precursor to the range of topics that we absolutely want to cover in the section that talks about implementation of comprehensive plans. So an important thing to note, and we'll make sure that we have taken note of that for the next session as well. I'm going to try to keep us on the other portions, but not because this isn't important. It's just we're going to cover it next week. So there's a Jan S. who'd like to speak. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, Jody. It's Jan Santerre, Maine Forest Service, and I review plans for the forestry information. And I wanted to make a follow-up comment to what Michael just said. For those of us that have been involved in this work for a good long time now, some might remember that we used to do collaborative training with the Maine Municipal Association to target code enforcement officers with this information. And it might be useful to revisit offering that type of programming again to make that connection that Michael articulated as being somewhat missing.
Awesome. Okay,
Right.
perfect. Thank you. Other thoughts about things that the survey questions missed? And we want to try to get a sense from you of, based on the conclusions that we drew, what does feel most important to you? Because at the end, as Judy mentioned, we're going to try to do a sort of prioritization exercise. So it would be helpful to hear a little bit about what felt to you to be most important. And just a reminder to put C in the chat. All right, I'm going to move us on. Just to avoid awkward silence. If you want to come back to this, just say so. We're going to move on to the next question then, which is question
7.
7, sorry. So question 7, reminder, indicate the effectiveness of reducing comprehensive plan inventory requirements, particularly to address the one size fits all concern in small communities. Comments that you'd like to make on this, either things that you felt were missing or things that really resonated for you that you feel are priorities. Jim F. writes, comment, growth areas in the absence of sewer systems will be limited. We need better waste treatment technology that's affordable. I'm not sure the survey considered technology. Thank you. Other missing elements or things that really resonated, feel like priorities. And folks in the room, please feel free, because we didn't have a chance to talk about this as much earlier. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
One thing, I'm not sure if this is exactly the place to add it, but thinking about better guidance for local data and you know, what exactly that looks like and guidance on how it can be collected.
Okay. It's great.
It's more emphasis on local data in general.
Okay. Should we move on? So I'll sort of explain. So 2 things. One is that you'll note that this is the first of 3 meetings, and when a few of us were planning this session, we were trying to figure out what are the right questions to be asking here to make sure that we get as much input today as possible. And we started out with, you know, in what ways do the survey results resonate with you? On what issues did you come to a completely different conclusion than other respondents did, or that the program did? And then finally, what's missing or wasn't captured? So, and then we had a little regroup earlier today to say, well, maybe those aren't the right questions, but really we're just trying to get the most amount of feedback from you as possible. So I'm going to move on to question 8, unless there's anything else on 7. All right, question 8.
Is it C?
Oh, go ahead. Michael M. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm
No.
delayed on that, and I think the one size fits all, or I think reducing the inventory requirements would be helpful, especially for what I've seen in 2 relatively small towns. Not that it's not important, but it did seem like it just made the lift that much harder. And so I just want to second that, like, the availability and ease of access of data would be really useful, because, yeah, regurgitating what the state is already telling us.
Right.
I think that it just kind of, the planning fatigue really starts to be noticeable with some of these chapters. And I don't think the community even knew what to do with half of the data. So.
Yep. No, really good point. Let's bring in Reagan Y. Unless
Hi,
I mispronounce it.
Reagan Y, Reagan Young from Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. Just a little bit more, really to add on what you're saying, Michael. I remember the last time I was going through the checklist with a community, the self-assessment checklist, it seemed like there were some questions in there. Either they were requirements for data or requirements for analyses about the data that I wasn't even sure existed in the state of Maine. And so some of that is just, the folks who are putting together these requirements, understanding what data is really available for these towns, what is feasible for them to collect. And then also, if you're asking a community to do an analysis about a specific data type, some guidance on how to go about that would be helpful, and both for regional organizations and I think some of the towns who attempt to go about that checklist on their own.
Awesome. Yeah, makes total sense. Great. Questions that you have about this particular question before we move on to 8? All right. The conclusions, prioritizing these conclusions, it's pretty high level, but anything that jumped out to you on the conclusions? All right, let's move on then to question 8. This is about identifying, go ahead, Tracy, do you want to go back to 7? Tracy D, and just, if you could identify yourself.
Hi, this is Representative Gear. I just wanted to just stick with the data for a minute because that's something that we discussed quite a bit on the Housing Committee when we were working the growth management bill previously in the last session. And I guess I just would love to hear from people because back to the points that were just made about the data, people not knowing what to do with the data, it not necessarily even being available or people knowing what it is. As I'm listening to this conversation, I'm wondering, is there a way to use data that is associated with the challenges and the goals that the community would have? So for example, if data around, say, people felt the need for more senior housing, data could be brought in to support and document that need and guide proposals around that issue, rather than say, here's a bunch of data, you guys figure out how to do it. And I guess I just wanted to put it out there because I spent a lot of my career in consulting, and I think really getting at what is the issue here would be a really important knowledge to guide ongoing efforts in this area.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. You're either suggesting that there be sort of more targeted data that is responsive to community needs that are already known, or you're wondering from this broader group if there are particular ways that we should be targeting, connecting available data with clear community needs.
Thanks. I think that both of those scenarios are something that I would like to hear more discussion or perspectives on, because one, I think oftentimes communities are able to get together and sit around the tables in the gym and identify what their needs are from their own perceptions as community members. And that could be one place of foundation and guidance around what data is needed to verify that perception, to explore its dimensions, and that then could lead to data being used to help develop solutions. And then I also think from a regional level, a lot of those issues might be identifiable through data that the regions might be creating or accessing and analyzing to provide that guidance to communities. And
Sure.
So both of those scenarios.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. So I'm going to leave that question out there. If folks want to be responding in some way to that, that's fine. I'm also going to keep us on track. So just leave it up to the group to decide if there are ways in which they'd like to respond to that. But in the meantime, somebody, Michael M., you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I was just following on those comments, I think one of the problems might just be the way that there's kind of a data dump to the communities. And while that data all might be useful, I think it seems unreasonable to ask communities to do a deep dive into every issue they have once every 10 years. And so all of this data might be really useful, but the conversations don't happen only once every 10 years. And I understand that they shouldn't, we should keep having these conversations, but I think that if we had one conversation, like 1 year just focused on any one of these topics, we might be able to use all of this data. And when these conversations come up, it'd be nice to be able to pull the data and then have the conversation and then develop our vision. But I think it's hard to get real depth when it's kind of like a fire hose of conversation and data and activity for, a year, 2, 3 years, and then the rest of the time is implementation. I think that it's not really how conversations and communities discuss. It feels like we've just started now. In Damascata, we're wrapping up our comp plan process, and I'm concerned that, like, essentially there's a lot of conversation happened, a lot of data was we dove into it, and we're not going to have another opportunity to dive into it for another 10 years. I think that it needs to be more responsive. There needs to be more of an internal conversation, and it's I think it's overwhelming, and so people kind of freeze up and then lurch forward and freeze up and lurch forward, and it's
Sure.
so.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
let me bring another voice into the conversation. For those of you online, you're able to read that in the chat. For those of us in the room, it's not legible on the screen. So I'll just read Matthew N's comment, which is that municipalities should definitely address the issues that are important to them, but not to the exclusion of the issues that all communities need to consider for a comprehensive plan. Each community I've worked with has done this. It's additive, not in substitution of the goals of the act. So I'm hearing, obviously, data is a hot topic, duly noted. I don't want to spend too much time on that at the exclusion of other topics. So I'm going to probably move us along. But Miriam T just mentioned, I wonder if those of us who review comprehensive plans at the state should be offering our expertise on how to use those data at the beginning of the process rather than just at the end. So a couple of hands raised in the room, so I'm going to take them. Either one.
I
If
think
you want to identify.
my name is Jennifer King with Eastern Maine Development.
Okay, hold on just 1 second. Can you hear? Are folks able to hear? Just speak again.
Jennifer King. All right.
Okay, great.
So I think part of what I've understood as a regional planner within Maine, Municipal Planning Assistance Program, that's part of the technical assistance that we provide to municipalities is when, for some towns that may have additional questions or would like to have, an additional set of data to provide them. I mean, we research. That's what we do. We research for these towns. And I don't think it's something that we should be putting on MPAP to add yet another layer of data to continue to provide for services, unless for some reason in the beginning, like maybe one of the 2 trainings that we have with Joan, she could provide us for those who don't understand or have the correct tools to find the data, that we could have a little training module for something like that. But I don't think it's up to MPAP to add yet another layer to data.
Okay, duly heard. I want to take another person in the room and then note a comment that was made online.
Oh, sorry.
Hand my comment.
I would say that as a new planner, especially in knowing, my name is Melanie Weston. I'm from the Kennebec Valley Council of Government. And while I understand it's not MPAP's duty to do the research, it is ours. If we don't know how to do the research and we don't know where that is, I think that would be an extremely valuable thing for them to offer so we can provide that better to communities. Or especially for new planners in the area and places up like where I'm from, where I'm doing 5 towns right now. So to be able to have that knowledge would be incredibly helpful.
Got it. And before I take you in the room, somebody responded to the comment about, I wonder if, you know, the those of us who review comprehensive plans where whether the state should be offering assistance upfront. Reagan replied, definitely this. There's little guidance for how to incorporate or act on conclusions that come along with the package. Alex writes, agreed, at least be able to provide more guidance on how to use this data. I'm cautious about the level of detail that may need to be provided, might create a large burden on agency staff. So let me take you in the room, and then others online is fine. And then we're going to move on because it sounds like we could do a deep dive on this particular issue for quite a while.
I think it comes back for me to local data and the availability of the local data and the challenges that these communities have using the census and things like that. I think often we talk about it, we acknowledge it, but we want to talk about senior housing in a community, and I don't have any good, clear numbers unless I send our local committee out to count and figure out what's available. I think it's a heavy lift to collect this local data, but I think it's something that we need more guidance and.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, that's.
There's one more person in the room, and then I'm gonna pivot us. So you get the last word here.
Tom from Municipal Planning Assistance Program. Just when it comes to the data question, what would be really helpful is if when someone says there's too much data, tell us what we don't need to include anymore. And if someone says that we need more data, tell us what it is that we need to include. As you guys know, we can include and exclude. We make that decision daily almost on what to include or exclude from the data. So it'd be helpful to know specifically. There are many topic areas we provide no data on, several topic areas we provide no data on. And there's some that we provide more on. So, you know, it's the decision that we can make pretty much on the fly.
Got it.
Actually, we can have it done in a few minutes.
Okay, all right, well, this is great. Thank you for all of these comments. This is super helpful. I'm going to suggest we pivot to question 8, which is looking at identifying the effectiveness of integrating natural hazard mitigation and community resilience planning with growth management. And so here are the related comments and conclusions that have been drawn. So reactions, just give you a moment to read all that again and get some reactions to that. No single room as well, of course.
It just disconnected.
Yeah, I don't.
What happened?
Our owl just disconnected. So they can still hear us. They just can't see us.
Okay, so folks online, you can still hear us. Maybe a thumbs up or something. Can you see us?
No, I can't.
Nope. Oh, well, we're here. That's okay. All right, that'll get worked out or not in the background, but we still want everybody's perspective on these conclusions or what's missing, including those in the room. Krista from Maine Farmland Trust. Hi, Krista.
Hi, yes. My name is Krista Chappell. I'm with the Maine Farmland Trust. I just wanted to comment on this point that you've made about integrating community resilience planning in particular with the comprehensive planning process. I think that's a really excellent idea. For one, the community resilience planning workshops and things and the guidelines that are in that can certainly inform the goals and action items that are outlined in the comprehensive plan. But additionally, I think by combining it as kind of one process, it leaves opportunities in the community for preventing burnout with the people you're trying to reach. I know the ones I've worked on both comprehensive plans and the community resilience planning process. And by the time you get around to doing both consecutively, oftentimes it's really difficult to engage with the community on the conversations you're trying to have because people are busy and tired of participating, frankly. So I think this is a great idea.
Awesome, thank you.
Grania. It's got a hand raised.
I'm not saying it. Oh, you have a hand raised. Okay, yeah, just use C since I can see, so I can hear you.
Simeon says you can't type in there.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Whoever's hand is raised, go ahead.
It's Grania.
Grania, please.
Hi, this is Grania with KV Cog. I guess it's more of a comment than a question about this, that, you know, the communities are already doing hazard mitigation planning with their county emergency management agencies. And there's a very comprehensive tool that they already use and that is standardized across the state for every county to use. And I feel like combining that with the fire marshal's community risk reduction tool, as well as some of these elements of resilience planning, would go a long way towards implementing these programs without having to recreate the wheel and having to recreate a whole new tool for communities to use, and kind of start allowing those plans to merge themselves in a really actionable way.
Grania, I'm seeing a number of people in the room here nodding their heads in agreement, and I don't know if are people able to see the folks in the room again? No. Okay, so yes, thank you. And you're getting a bunch of nods here. Other comments, either missing elements, things that feel like priorities to you, questions you have about the data. Jim F. writes, we should be considering a number of hazards in comprehensive plans. Transportation has to consider highway safety. Housing considers building codes. Land use considered exposure to toxic emissions, etc. Thank you for that. Other reactions?
Is Grania's hand still up or for another question?
I think it might be still up, but Grania, if you want to just mention something again, feel free.
Yeah, just off of that comment that was just made, that the county EMA tool does a lot more than natural hazard mitigation and natural hazard vulnerability assessment. There are a lot more steps to it that would address, you know, toxic chemicals in a community and transportation type issues. So it really is, it covers kind of all the bases.
Gotcha. More head nods here. All right, great. Okay, and prioritization. Anything on that? All right, then I'm going to move us on to question 9, which is indicating the usefulness of the following sources of information and data to prepare a comprehensive. And then there were specific data sources referenced. If you could read the comments, related comments, and then the conclusions drawn, and give us your feedback on that. See you in a moment. Any reactions in the room? Yeah, go ahead.
This is Erica from AvCog for anybody that can't see me. I know and working with the committee is the economy chapter. There's just so little data for most of the towns that I work with that I feel like I'm kind of pulling at straws to get something together. And you know, I've said to them, if I could go out and get all of this information and talk to everybody that lives in this town, I would. I just physically don't. You can't do that. So that's definitely the chapter I see the most difficulty with, and I have to give the most guidance on, and I even struggle with to some extent. So
thank you for identifying that.
This is Laura with Lincoln County Planning. I know we talked about this a little bit before about resources coming from MPAP around this, but
and like where the line is with regional councils providing the support versus MPAP. But we've had volunteers with committees working on comp plans who aren't able to understand how to use different data sources, whether it's the mapping portals or census data, how to navigate the website when they're looking at the website, whether they're looking at block group or CPT. When they type in the town names, it comes up, with both options. So I think, again, just reiterating, if there are opportunities to provide like how to use this tool, whether it's like a click through of the story maps or something, I think that would be useful. That's something that's pretty simple on the creator's end of these tools.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. So I'm definitely hearing needs for upfront training, acknowledging that the state staff capacity is limited, but are there ways to be providing that information in an efficient manner? Other comments, either about what felt missing here or priorities? And Grania, do you have a comment on this as well?
No, it's not letting me lower my hand.
Okay. Reagan writes, I think the takeaways are on point. The new statewide tools that have come out of MPAP recently have been welcome additions. That's nice to hear. Okay. Anything else on this one before we pivot? All right. Then you'll recall that questions 20 through 23 are all of a group. And it's basically how much you agree or disagree with certain statements. The first one being that the state's review of a plan identified important information, recommendations, strategies that were not considered by our planning committee or were missing from our plan. The second was that comments and recommendations provided by state agencies during the review process were useful, and incorporating them into the plan improved the overall quality of it. The third is that having our plan deemed consistent by the state made it easier to get our plan adopted. And the fourth is having our plan deemed consistent by the state helped our community qualify for state funding to implement our plan. You'll remember that Judy noted that that particular question did not get a high agreement rating. So reactions to that, any surprises there? A little bit about your own experience would be helpful, whether that squares with your experience. Michael, go ahead.
I can just tell you in Newcastle, the last comp plan was not found to be consistent, and as far as I can tell, it hasn't had any impact on funding. So for what that's worth.
So was not consistent, but it's been successful in receiving funding.
I mean, it's hard to say if there's grants that were missed. As far as I know, it wasn't like explicitly, no, you have an inconsistent comp plan. I do think and this was before I was here, the decision to kind of deprioritize state consistency findings was because everybody felt there was at least some sense that it wasn't going to impact funding or grant opportunities. So again, for what that's worth, it didn't seem to be a carrot or a stick for Newcastle.
Okay. All right. I got it.
Avery Header.
All right. So we have two people in the room and then a couple of folks online. So I'll definitely get you online. I'm not ignoring you, but you go ahead. Did you have something?
Yes, and I messed up something on the screen, so I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm going to come back to you.
I got it now. Just thinking, I don't know if it's guidance to the state reviewers and in terms of the type of feedback they're providing. I know, some context for them, like we get plans back where folks will go through, particularly for the 4 resource chapters, and provide feedback and, oh, this was out of date and this was out of date. And I think there needs to be some level of prioritization and the feedback that they provide us. You know, yes, this is out of date, but that's because it was in the data pack that you sent me and it was out of date when you sent it to me. And it happens. I mean, I think some of these state agencies are paying a lot of attention to this and are I know that, you know, Judy's office is working with beginning with Habitat, but, you know, prioritize and then, yeah, really emphasizing like, do I go back and try to incorporate this change, or can you take a few extra minutes and type out specifically, like strike this and give me some specific changes that you want to make? Because I think when that doesn't happen, if it's not required feedback, it's just being thrown in the trash. Like these communities have already gone through this sometimes more, like 2 to 5 year process. And by the time they get this feedback, if it's not required, it just goes in the trash. So.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to take one more person in the room and then go back online. Are you good? Okay. All right. So before I take you, Lee, you're next, but I just wanted to read out because folks in the room aren't able to read Miriam's comments. Hi, Miriam. Having started in a role that provides agency review not that long ago, I can say that it's been difficult to get training or learning support on what kinds of feedback towns need or want and how best to approach my review. So let me jump up to Lee F. Go right ahead and just introduce yourself if you would.
Good morning, Lee Feldman. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Development for the town of Kennebunk, but I previously was the Director of Planning for Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. And one of the issues that comes to light with the whole thing is that several years ago, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not the certified comprehensive plans were even moving people up the line for funding if they were applying for grants. And one of the things we had done was call a number of the state agencies that would provide grant opportunities for the communities. And they were telling us that that was not a consideration for them when they were when towns were applying for certain grants. They were not reviewing the comprehensive plans to determine whether they were consistent or whether or not they ought to be moved up the line for funding. So I think that's something that needs to be either clarified or the agencies need to really get back to following the letter of the law on making sure that they do that as folks apply for grants.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to take these in slightly different order because I understand that Roberta's had her hand up. Sorry for not seeing you, Roberta. I'll put you in just 1 second and then Justin, but I do want to read aloud a comment from Ben Smith that says, I agree with the statement that state comments at the end of a long process, especially if the plan's already adopted, are of marginal value on shaping the direction of the plans, goals, and policies and strategies. So let me take Roberta and then Justin. Go ahead. Roberta, you're muted if you're trying to chat.
Let's try.
And so keep trying, Roberta, and just jump in when you can. But in the meantime, I'll take Justin Schlawen. I think it's Justin Schlawen. Go ahead, Justin. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody, and I'm really appreciating this discussion. I'm Justin Schlauen. I manage the Beginning with Habitat program at the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. And I just wanted to note that Beginning with Habitat is kind of overhauling our approach to comprehensive plans as we speak. We are moving, as many have suggested, in the direction of providing more detailed and assistance at the start of comprehensive plans in the effort to really minimize the need for much review at the end. And so what that looks like is sort of a revamp of a lot of the materials that we're providing at the outset. And many of you may have seen that if you've requested materials this year, but also a lot more technical assistance at the outset. So if you're interested to learn more, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. I'm going to take one comment online and then somebody in the room. Reagan, go right ahead online.
Hi, everyone. Something that's just coming to me, hearing everybody talk about both the kind of feedback that the state gives us and some of the challenges that communities have. I think it all really ties back to this comment and takeaway that you have on the slide of the disproportionate emphasis on technical compliance versus actionable planning. And it sounds like, you know, I think it's in part just how the law is written, but I think we're all kind of in that habit of the inventory being the huge lift of the planning process. And it just sounds like we all sort of need a mindset shift towards, you know, actionable planning steps. Now, you know, is that what the state agencies should be giving feedback on instead of our inventory? How were our goals, policies, and strategies? Did they seem effective to you? Do you have new ideas? That kind of thing. And I think we also need to incorporate that in our process as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Somebody in the room?
Yes. Hi, I'm Melanie Nash at Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. And I was going to respond to something that Lee J had said a couple comments ago about the funding concerns that some towns have, about, you know, how much of a difference being consistent makes, and relating that back to one of the survey questions, which was something along the lines of, does being consistent impact if your plan is adopted or how your plan is adopted? And there was a plan. So going again back to what Lee J said about their concerns about funding and how much of a difference this makes. There was a plan I was involved in a couple of years ago for a town that had those exact concerns. And the concerns about the technical compliance versus actual implementable, actionable planning. And this town made the decision to go to town meeting and get their plan adopted and then seek consistency. And I just, it's like a really good example of towns being concerned about exactly this thing of technical compliance versus planning.
Sure. Two comments that folks in the room can't read. Jim F says, I've always appreciated the state's feedback on comprehensive plans. 20 years ago, the feedback presented serious barriers to local adoption, but the current level seems to be very helpful. And then Roberta was having some technical issues, but wanted to say that in Castine, they took the comments at the end and are adding them to their implementation process. The state acceptance of their plan was a big help in getting it passed in their community. And Matthew N. Wanted to agree with Ben Smith's point about, just as a reminder, Ben Smith's point was, I agree with the statement that state comments at the end of the long process, especially if the plan's already adopted, are of marginal value. Matthew says, agree, the comments are more likely to result in compliance responses, quote unquote, doing just what's necessary to get consistency. While this may be less than desirable and not viewed as meeting the ideals of the law, I'm not sure it's a huge problem. Even a community that checks every box before they submit will ultimately focus on some issues more than others based on their local priorities. Let me just sort of dial us back and see if there are, just sort of like hit a pause for a moment, read the slide again, see if it's bringing up any other issues other than or in addition to kind of the timing of feedback, because I'm definitely hearing a lot about that. Like what's the most useful point in which to get feedback. Anything else, something that's missing here?
Can I offer one thing?
Yeah, please.
So this is Judy East, Bureau Director, Resource Information, Land Use Planning. As the program staff and I have been talking about the state review and how things are changing, beginning with Habitat, and how many new staff people there are in these programs in state agencies. We've talked about something like a symposium in the winter that says, that brings together the people who are involved in other state agencies, who provide the data and review the comp plans, and have the conversations around, first of all, what is this law? What are the data requirements? What should the data requirements be? At what state in the process should they be provided in order to make the review later almost moot, or at least, giving guidance that is useful. So that is one action that I sort of forgot to put in here as a conclusion, but it's something that I wanted to let people know about, because you know, I hear Jan, who's done this for years, and then I think it was Miriam was the name, who's just starting to do this. And then, you know, still the issues about like DOT provides a big data dump of shapefiles, and some towns are like, what am I supposed to do with this? So we're really thinking about, and this conversation is super helpful to guide something like a symposium on with gathering the state agencies together and say, let's rethink this, or at least get everybody on the same page.
Sure. Alex W. writes, that sounds great, Judy. Awesome. Juliana says, agreed. Agreed, Marion says. All right, all right. We got it.
Yeah, third agree.
All right, so I'm gonna ask, so we're sort of making this up in real time, as you probably noticed, particularly on the technology front. So what we had planned to do was spend the last like 15 minutes before 2 o'clock, and can certainly finish up early, which I think we will, but I'm trying to come up with a prioritization process of some kind. I just want to like check the temperature as to, based on the way the notes have been taken, based on the format of them, whether that feels like a useful and realistic exercise for a moment. So just if those online want to just be patient for a couple of moments while we look at what we come up with and see if it's useful.
So just so you know, what I'm doing now, Joan has sent me her notes that summarize what she feels are the high-level conversations that we've had. They are numbered, and we're going to try to see if we can get some consensus on, or not consensus, if we can prioritize. And the problem I'm having is trying to find where the Outlook folder is, because it's not popping up. So let me just do this, because I don't know why I'm only seeing it. And
there we go.
There it is. Okay. So I'm going to pluck this out. Looks like we've got 10 with a couple of subs. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and put them in here, and we'll see if this is going to work. Very difficult to read for us in the room. How is that? I know it, let me just go from current slide. Little bit easier for you guys online. We can't see that.
We can do an after 2 o'clock exercise.
Yeah, we could do it. Exactly. We can share this.
See that list. Thumbs up, something, so I know. Anybody able to see this?
How about, okay, looks like you can.
Thumbs up. Yes, that's a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we were going to ask you to do, what we will ask you to do, is in the chat, using the numbers and the subletters of this, from this list, put in, you know, pick your own number, 3, what you believe are your 3 top priorities, what you think should be the 3 highest priorities for direction for MPAP. And this is essentially a summary of the topics that you raised in the last hour. That will at least give us some indication, you know, for those of you attending today. It'll enable us to see if there's some patterns here and certain things that rise up to the top. So, you know, Leah's done it. This is what we're talking about. Puts a few numbers in with comments in between. That's what we're looking for. Susan Silverio in Lincolnville says, please send materials to, could somebody send the list to, are you seeing that online, in the chat?
I see her address.
Yeah.
Is she looking for?
I think she's looking for the numbers list.
Can it be pasted in the chat?
That might be
It'd be a little tough. The other thing, Joan she can email it to the person who just asked.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I
that's what
missed
you
the
do.
name, but also Joan is going to email this list, not just to me, but to everybody in this room, and that will be the way that you can see it.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Okay, so yeah, people are doing it. We've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folks so far. Yeah, we'll just give you a few minutes. Yeah, you're welcome, Susan. So just for others on the line who've already done this exercise, maybe what we should do is, because we know everybody can multitask while you're thinking about these things, I'll give you like 1 more minute to do that, but then just pivot to kind of like what's coming next.
Sure.
What are the sessions next week and after that? So.
Okay, so I won't advance the slide that shows you what's coming up because I think I can remember. There are 2 more meetings. I don't have the dates off the top of my head. If someone can shout those out if you've got them. Next week, the second focus group will focus on this whole issue of improving implementation or supporting implementation of comprehensive plans. And then the third meeting, which will be, I'll get those dates for you. Actually, it's 13th and 14th of next week. And I'll pop that slide up once you've had a chance to finish this prioritization. So first one is, how do we support implementation of comp plans? And then the final one is prioritizing technical assistance needs. And I think we're going to hear what those technical assistance needs are in all 3 sessions, but with limited resources and a state budget that's going to be tight this year, we really want to get targeted recommendations on where to go with the guidance and technical assistance that's needed. And then I guess in terms of the—
Let me just jump in for
Sure.
1 moment.
Yep.
So just to reiterate, focus group number 2 will be on November 13th. It will be from 4 to 6 in the late afternoon. Completely.
Oh, it'll be completely hybrid. Okay, sorry. Completely. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the final one that's focused on technical assistance priorities is November 14th from noon to 2. And you'll use the exact same team link for all 3 meetings.
And that's all on the story map. So, yeah.
So, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Okay, so in terms of where do we then go from there, there are ongoing conversations right now about changes to the growth management statute. The Maine Association of Planners is providing some very comprehensive, detailed input to the sponsors of LD 1976. So some of this information will work its way into that process. We specifically wanted to get through and done with all of this work in order to contribute. Sure, we hope to get this done sooner than we did, but life happens and this is the timing that we're on. Also, the Maine Office of Community Affairs is where the Municipal Planning Assistance Program is going to land if all things go through the budget within 8 months. And we're seriously hoping that the information and guidance that's provided in this process is something that that office, this program, the new director, Samantha Horn, can use to prioritize the work of that office. So I just want to thank you all so much because the contributions in the survey, the level of engagement in the comments and in this meeting has just been absolutely wonderful and essential to improving this program. So thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you next week. If we don't, those will be recorded meetings.
Thank you.
Has everyone had a chance to do their well, maybe I should ask, is someone still working on priorities? Because let's not
Yeah,
bail
we won't close it out
just yet.
We got a lot of numbers here. I haven't counted the entries and compared them to the number of participants, but, a lot of thank yous. So I think we're good. All right, so we're gonna stop the recording. Why don't we just wait a moment before we close out the meeting in case folks are still working on the numbers?
Recording is ended.
Okay.